Hi, my name is Nicole Gagner. I am a teaching artist with the North Dakota and South Dakota Council on the Arts. I'm on both teaching artist rosters. Just in case you're not familiar with what a teaching artist does, we are professional artists in whichever media that is. So for me, it's a painter, but teaching artists can be dancers, musicians, anything like that. And then we also have the pleasure of sharing our art with students of all ages, in my case. Some young students, some old, and we get to go all over to different places, teaching in schools, in nursing homes, to students of all ages. And it's really a joy to be able to share our art. So today I'm going to share a fun project that you can do with just supplies around your house. Since I am a painter, I love painting inside and out. And so I'm going to show you how to make your own washable paint. It's a sidewalk chalk, but you're going to make it yourself. And if you are like me and don't really like the texture of chalk on your fingers, this is a great alternative for that. So what you're going to need to make your own sidewalk chalk, you're just going to need regular cornstarch, nothing fancy. This just came out of my cupboard. And we're going to do a ratio of 1 cup of cornstarch to 1 cup of water. So if you want to make a whole lot of paint, you can just double or triple the recipe. I'm just going to start with the 1 for now. You can always mix up more as you go. So all we're going to do is measure out 1 cup of cornstarch into a bowl. This recipe is kind of nice since it doesn't use any crazy paints or anything like that. I can just use my regular kitchen supplies here. I do have studio mixing cups, studio measuring cups for when I'm doing painty type stuff, but this is just going to be cornstarch, water, and food coloring, so all of it's food safe. If you haven't worked with food coloring before, be a little bit careful with your clothing. It can stain clothing, but as far as your skin and our sidewalk, it'll wash off of those just fine. Okay, so I'm just going to measure out 1 cup of cornstarch. Maybe a tiny bit more. Just put that in a bowl. And 1 cup of water. And we're just kind of making a little slurry here. So this will be the base of our paint. So usually paints are made with oil as the base, or sometimes acrylic paint has kind of a plastic polymer base that helps it stay, or watercolor has something called gum arabic is the binder that holds it all together. So in this case, our cornstarch is our binder, and it's nice because it washes up easily. It's not expensive. And it doesn't feel yucky like some other things do. So if you get a little bit on your hand or on your skin, it's going to wash off really easy. So just keep stirring until that's nice and smooth. And I'm not going to add my color directly into here because I want to portion it out into, you can just use regular muffin tins. Like I said, these are all going to clean up nice and easily. But if you have special art muffin tins, that's great too. Okay, so once that is all stirred up, sometimes the cornstarch wants to sit and cake a little bit at the bottom. So really make sure you've got it nice and stirred up. You can either spoon a little bit into each cup, or if you're feeling daring, you could pour it. I've been a little bit messy today, so maybe I won't be too daring, and I'll just spoon a little bit into each. And this doesn't have to be exactly perfect, because from here on, we're really just eyeballing it. The colors that we mix up in our cups will look pretty similar to the colors that we're going to paint on the sidewalk today. So it doesn't have to be too perfect. We can kind of do it by eye. And you don't have to fill up every single tin in your muffin cup. You might know that you're going to do a rainbow. So you want to have a red, an orange, a yellow, a green, a blue, a purple. So that's 6 colors. If you know that you want to do something a little bit more complicated than that, maybe you'll mix up a few more colors. Totally up to you. Or your palette might be a little bit simpler. Maybe you only want the primary colors. So the primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. And what that means is the primary colors can't be made. So I wouldn't be able to mix 2 other colors together to get a red, for example. So if you just want to stick with the primary colors and then maybe do a little bit of mixing on the sidewalk, that's fine too. All right, so I've got 11 spots open, so I will just start mixing up some colors here. I just have regular food coloring that I had probably left over from Christmas cookies or something like that. So you can just follow the recipes on the back here. You don't need to overdo it. Food coloring is pretty potent. So if it says 1 or 2 drops, that'll be plenty. If you don't have food coloring, you could also use tempera paint or watercolor, like a washable liquid watercolor could work well for this. So kind of experiment with what you have. But I am I'll start with the primary colors because like I said, you can't make those with other colors. So I've got a blue here. I'll just start with 1 drop and see how that goes. This will kind of give me an idea how strong the other colors will be. So that's a nice, pretty pastel blue. You can see the cornstarch in here is kind of making it lighter. But as it gets mixed in, it's getting pretty nice and bright. So if I wanted this a little bit lighter, I could add, if I had more of the cornstarch and water mixture, that would act like a white, and that could make it a little bit lighter. That's a pretty nice color there. So now when I mix my next color, if I don't want the blue from my spoon on it, I'll have to make sure that I really wash it off well, especially if I'm making another primary color. If I get blue in my red, if you're familiar with the color wheel, that will make a purple, mixing blue and red together, which maybe we'll want to do that later. But for right now, I want to have my primary color. So I will just put this to the side so I can have a nice clean spoon maybe. Or if you're closer to your sink, you can just wash it off. All right, so for my red, again, I'm just going to start with 1 dot. That might have been a little bit more than a dot. I've got gel food colors here, so they're a little thick, but that's okay. If I just have a really bright red, that's fine. And you'll notice that as you start to mix more and more colors, your cornstarch might settle to the bottom a little bit. That's totally fine. That's just kind of what it does. So as you're using it, you might need to keep stirring these a little bit with your paintbrushes or whatever you're using to paint with. If you decide to put these in a spray bottle, that can be a fun way to use them too. You might just need to shake them up a little bit before you start using them. So like I said here, the white of the cornstarch is making it a little bit lighter. That's more of a pinky color. I like that though, so I'll leave that pink there and maybe make this one red so you can have a few more drops in here to have a darker color. That might have been a little bit too much. That's okay. All right, so I'm just going to keep going here, mixing up all of my colors. If you're not exactly sure how to mix up your colors, I really recommend looking at a color wheel. That can help you too, in addition to if your food coloring has a recipe on the back. But usually if you're mixing 2 primary colors together, you're going to make a secondary color. So I mentioned red and purple are going to, or I'm sorry, red and blue are going to make purple. Another secondary color is green, so you get that by mixing blue and yellow together. The other secondary color is orange, so you get that by mixing red and yellow together. And then if you want something that's in between those primary and secondary colors, those are called tertiary colors. So if I wanted a red-orange, I would get that by mixing red and orange together. Yellow-green would be by mixing yellow and green together, etc. So you can kind of experiment with these a little bit. If you want them lighter, use a little bit less food coloring or a little bit more of your cornstarch mixture. If you want them a little bit darker, add a little bit more of your paint, or even be careful with black food coloring. It can really, really take over. But if you have a little bit of one black pot and you can pull from that to kind of darken your colors a little bit, that can be really fun. Just make sure that they don't get too gray. Sometimes black can take over. But just keep mixing your colors, experiment with it, and then we'll take this outside in just a second after we have all of our colors mixed up. All right, so I've got my entire palette mixed up here. You can see I've kind of got a range of kind of most of the colors of the rainbow. Just followed the directions on the box here. Depending on what food colorings you're using, or if you're using watercolor or something like that, the pigments that they use will be different. Some colors might come out a little more like what you were expecting than others. So just experiment with it. If it doesn't go exactly how you were planning, be ready to roll with it. Try to make something else. This is really just about having fun. It's a very non-permanent media. That's like kind of the point of chalk, is that it can wash off and you can do it again. So be really experimental with it. A lot of times when I start a painting, I will sketch things out and try to make things be exactly how I'm imagining it. But this is really just a time to play around and see what the paint looks like, what colors you can mix up. Can you mix things on the sidewalk? So this is my palette. I'm going to take this outside here in just a second. My brushes, instead of using regular paint brushes like I normally would for a painting, I'm going to use just some sponges and sponge brushes. And the reason I'm doing that is not because of the cornstarch. The cornstarch and food coloring, the brushes would be fine with those. It's the sidewalk that I'm painting on. Could be really, really hard on the bristles of my brushes, and I wouldn't really be able to use them for painting anymore. But the sponge brushes will hold up a little bit better, and even if they get torn up, it's not the end of the world. They're kind of made to be used and abused. So that's what I'm using here. If you would rather drip or drizzle the paint, you could put it in cups and maybe mix up a little bit more of it and kind of go Jackson Pollock-y with that. If you don't know who that artist is, I definitely recommend you look it up. He didn't use any brushes. He just dripped and drizzled. There's also artists that have used spray bottles and other ways to apply paint, or sponges to stamp and things. There's lots of ways that you can apply your paint here. Like I said, if you put it in a spray bottle, you might just have to kind of shake it up so that the cornstarch doesn't settle out. I'm just going to be stirring mine with my brushes as I go. So we'll take this outside and get painting. All right, so now we are outside. You can use this chalk paint anywhere, as long as it is either your sidewalk or you have permission from somebody. If you're doing it in a public sidewalk, just make sure that you're giving people the right of way and being respectful, moving if people need to get by, things like that. So I have got a cup of water here. I've got my foam brushes. The way that I like to work is just one or two colors at a time. So I'll keep those brushes going between those two colors, and I'll kind of work in my whole space. And then I'll wash those brushes out and maybe switch to another color. If you don't mind switching back and forth, washing your brushes out and switching back and forth between the colors, you can do that too. It's really just up to you. I say just play with it, have fun, try it out, and see what happens. You'll notice that the colors are going to change as they dry. So if you put it down and it isn't showing up very well, wait for it to dry and you'll get a little bit of a better feel for what the colors are going to look like outside of the outside of your palette and on the sidewalk. So just experiment with that and have fun. All right, so a few things to talk about. If you want to have a little bit more control, you want to be a little bit more precise, you might want to sweep your sidewalk before you start. I got started painting and had a little couple rocks and dirt and stuff in there that kind of got in my way. So if you want to have a little bit more control, you might want to sweep up a little bit before you go. You might have noticed I was mixing some of the colors as I went. If you haven't had a lot of experience mixing colors and paint, I would suggest taking a look at a color wheel and really figuring out which colors are going to play nice together, how you can mix those colors together. You'll notice that I have my red sitting next to my green, but I never mixed the red in with the green. That's because red and green are complementary colors, so that means they look nice together, but if you mix them together, you'll get grays or browns. And I wanted to keep this really nice and light and bright and colorful. So if you want to avoid getting kind of those grayish, brownish, muddy colors, put the complementary colors by each other, but don't mix them in with each other. But you can mix colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. Those are called analogous colors. Those all play together nicely. So I mixed back and forth between my red, my orange, and my yellow. Those all mixed together nicely. And you can see some of the paints had a little bit more cornstarch in it, so some of those were a lot lighter. Some had a little bit more of the food coloring in it, so some of those were a little bit more saturated colors. But just kind of play around with those. You can see I used a couple brown stamps as daubers too, so you can experiment with kind of stamping and things like that. I mentioned at the beginning that I wasn't going to use nice brushes. You can see how beat up this brush got just from doing this little area here. It started off fully formed, nice and fresh like this one, and it's kind of fallen apart now. That's okay. That's what I bought it for, to use it. But just keep that in mind that you don't want to use your nice brushes with this for that. This can be a great way to send a message to somebody if you want to say somebody's having a birthday and you can't see them in person, but you want to write a nice message outside of their house. Get a couple brushes, bring some paint over, and decorate their sidewalk. Or you could write other messages, things like that. Just start with brand new brushes and you'll have a little bit more control. While you're outside painting, if you're in direct sunlight like I am, you might have the sun getting in your eyes a little bit. If it's bothering you, I would recommend wearing a hat to keep the sun out of your eyes. You'll notice when you start mixing colors, if you're wearing sunglasses, the colors don't look the same. So then when you take your sunglasses off, it might look completely different than how you thought it looked. So if you're mixing colors and the sun is getting in your eyes, I recommend wearing like a big hat or a baseball cap or something like that. The sunglasses will kind of mess up your perception of the colors. All right, so that's going to do it for me. Hopefully you will try this out and make it your own. You know, like I said, these are just supplies that you hopefully have in your kitchen, so you can use those to stay at home, stay safe, make art. If you do try these out, I would love to hear about it. You can find me on social media. I'm Painter Nicole everywhere. I'm easy to find. Thank you for the South Dakota Council on the Arts for supporting artists and giving us a chance to share our art with you. So yeah, just thanks a lot. Hopefully you try this out, have fun with it. And you know, you can always rinse it off if you didn't, if you want to try again. So thanks so much for watching. And now I've got a fresh canvas and I can paint again.